Hello, especially for the Dirty Secrets channel.
Caroline Mitchell's psychological landscape was as precisely curated as the academic papers she meticulously researched. Her professional life was a testament to intellectual rigor, a world where human behavior could be systematically mapped, analyzed, and understood. Northwestern University's psychology department was more than just her workplace. It was her sanctuary, a realm where complex human interactions could be reduced to observable patterns, where the chaotic messiness of human emotion could be contained within elegant theoretical frameworks. Her specialty was advanced behavioral psychology, with a focus on identity construction and psychological manipulation. Colleagues respected her for her ruthless analytical approach, her ability to dissect human behavior with surgical precision. Doctoral students whispered about her groundbreaking research on how individuals create and maintain psychological personas. 32, Caroline had already published 3 critically acclaimed papers. Her most recent work explored how trauma and social conditioning create intricate psychological defense mechanisms. Little did she know she was about to become the subject of the most complex psychological experiment of her life. James Holloway appeared like a perfectly constructed hypothesis made flesh. Tall, precisely 6'2", with the kind of measured movements that suggested both intellectual restraint and physical confidence. His profession as a rare books dealer seemed almost too perfectly aligned with academic circles. Their first meeting at the International Rare Manuscripts Conference in Boston felt like a moment choreographed by some unseen psychological architect. He approached her during a break between presentations, his conversation so precisely calibrated that it felt like he had been studying her professional publications for years. "Your work on identity reconstruction is fascinating," he said, his voice a carefully modulated instrument of intellectual seduction. "I've been following your research for some time." Caroline, who prided herself on professional detachment, found herself unexpectedly engaged. Most academic interactions were dry, formulaic. This felt different, charged, as if some deeper resonance was occurring beneath the surface of their conversation. Within 18 months, they were married. A union that seemed to her colleagues like a perfect intellectual partnership. But perfection, Caroline would learn, was always the most elaborate form of deception. The first true indication that something was fundamentally wrong came 17 months into their marriage. A momentary flicker in James's eyes when she mentioned a colleague's name. A pause that was infinitesimally too long. A micro-expression of something, fear? Calculation, that her trained psychological eye caught immediately. Caroline's professional training made her hyper-aware of behavioral anomalies. She had built her entire academic reputation on understanding the microscopic tells that revealed deeper psychological truths. Micro-expressions, subtle muscular tensions, the infinitesimal ways humans leaked information contrary to their intended communication. James's background seemed impeccable on every measurable level. Professional references checked out with remarkable consistency. His international network of rare book dealers and academic connections appeared thoroughly documented. Old-school ties verified. Professional credentials authenticated. Yet something felt fundamentally wrong. Small inconsistencies began to accumulate like intellectual sediment. A photograph that seemed slightly off, perhaps digitally manipulated in ways too subtle for casual observation. A story about his childhood that didn't quite align when examined through her professional analytical lens. Conversations that would subtly redirect when she asked specific questions about his past. Her research had always focused on how humans construct narrative identities, how people create personas that serve specific psychological needs. She understood the mechanical architecture of self-presentation better than most. But with James, something felt different. Not just carefully managed, but architecturally constructed. Like a complex psychological experiment where every variable had been meticulously controlled. The books in his private study became her first genuine investigative pathway. Rare volumes on identity reconstruction. advanced psychological studies about long-term strategic manipulation, texts about creating alternate personas that went far beyond standard academic research. Not just academic interest, something more calculated, something that suggested preparation rather than pure intellectual curiosity. Private investigator Caroline discreetly hired Marcus Reyes, a former FBI behavioral specialist turned private consultant, represented the most sophisticated approach to uncovering hidden truths. Reyes understood psychological investigation as an art form. His methods went far beyond simple background checks. He specialized in deconstructing constructed identities, tracing the invisible threads that connected seemingly disconnected biographical fragments. His initial report was a masterpiece of investigative revelation. James Holloway's credentials were phantoms, meticulously crafted illusions that dissolved under professional scrutiny. The rare book dealer network he claimed to be part of? Non-existent. Academic connections? Elaborately constructed digital mirages. Photographs from his supposed past showed signs of sophisticated digital manipulation. Professional references that appeared authentic under casual examination became gossamer-thin constructions when deeply investigated. Each layer of James's identity peeled away like an elaborate psychological onion, revealing nothing at its core. More disturbing were the connections Reyes began to uncover. James wasn't just a lone operator. He was part of a larger network, a complex ecosystem of psychological operatives who specialized in long-term strategic manipulation. Caroline's own research methodology became both her greatest weapon and most significant vulnerability. The true horror of James's approach became progressively clear. This wasn't just marital deception. This was a comprehensive psychological experiment with Caroline as its primary subject. Every interaction, every conversation, every moment of their relationship had been carefully engineered. Her academic research topics hadn't been a coincidence. Her professional connections, her psychological vulnerabilities, everything had been studied, mapped, strategically approached with the precision of a complex scientific experiment. James hadn't just met her by chance. He had been preparing for their interaction for years, studying her publications, tracking her professional development, understanding her psychological landscape with such intricate detail that their entire relationship felt like a perfectly constructed laboratory scenario. Her expertise in human behavior, the very skill that had made her a respected academic, had become the mechanism of her potential psychological destruction. The revelations went exponentially beyond simple marital deception. Caroline discovered a sophisticated underground network of psychological operatives, professionals who studied human behavior not as an academic pursuit but as a form of strategic control. A complex ecosystem that existed in the shadowy intersections between psychological research, government intelligence, and private sector manipulation. James was a key operative in this network. And she, Caroline Mitchell, the brilliant psychological researcher, had been his most sophisticated long-term project. Her research on identity reconstruction, trauma responses, and psychological manipulation hadn't just been academic work. It had been a roadmap for those who saw human psychology as a terrain to be conquered and controlled. The network's reach was terrifyingly extensive. Academic institutions, government agencies, private research organizations, all interconnected through a web of psychological manipulation that most would consider impossible. The more Caroline investigated, the more complex the conspiracy became. This wasn't just about her. This was about understanding how psychological manipulation could be weaponized, how human identity could be systematically deconstructed and reconstructed. Her own research had made her the perfect target. Her methodological approach to understanding human behavior had been used against her with surgical precision. The network James belonged to saw human psychology as a battlefield. Individuals were not autonomous beings but variables to be studied, controlled, manipulated. Caroline's transformation was nothing short of a psychological rebirth. Her academic training, once a tool of passive observation, became a weaponized instrument of strategic counterintelligence. She began by creating an elaborate network of her own. Carefully selected colleagues, former graduate students, and professional contacts became unwitting participants in her intricate plan. Each connection was meticulously cultivated, each relationship strategically positioned like pieces on a complex chessboard. Her research methodology transformed. Where she once studied psychological manipulation academically, she now applied those principles with surgical precision. Every interaction became a data point, every conversation a potential leverage mechanism. James and his network had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had chosen a subject who was not just intelligent but adaptable. A psychological researcher who understood manipulation at its most fundamental level. Her home became a command center. Walls covered with intricate mind maps. Digital archives of encrypted information. Complex relationship diagrams that traced the network's potential connections. What had once been her personal space was now a strategic operations hub. First strategic move was information gathering. Caroline began to systematically document every inconsistency in James's background. Financial records, digital footprints, professional connections. Each piece of information became a potential weapon. Her approach was multifaceted. She wasn't just seeking revenge. She was conducting the most comprehensive psychological investigation of her career. The network James belonged to was far more complex than initial investigations suggested. It wasn't just a simple organizational structure, but a sophisticated ecosystem of psychological manipulation that spanned multiple institutional boundaries. Caroline discovered layers of complexity that defied traditional understanding. Government agencies, private research institutions, academic networks, all interconnected through subtle psychological manipulation techniques. Her breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A series of encrypted communications she discovered suggested the network was developing advanced psychological control methodologies. Not just research, but practical applications of psychological manipulation that could potentially reshape human behavior on a massive scale. The ultimate purpose remained tantalizingly unclear. Were they developing advanced psychological warfare techniques? Exploring the limits of human psychological resilience? Preparing for some form of mass behavioral modification? Each revelation opened more questions. Each answer became a new layer of complexity. Caroline's transformation was now complete. She was no longer an academic researcher or a victim. She had become a strategic psychological operative. Her approach combined multiple disciplines: psychological research, strategic intelligence gathering, advanced behavioral analysis. Each skill became a precise instrument in her comprehensive counterintelligence strategy. She began to infiltrate the network's communication channels. Not through direct confrontation, but through sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques she had spent years studying. Creating digital personas, establishing subtle communication networks, inserting herself into the periphery of their complex ecosystem. The network believed they had chosen her as a subject. They were about to discover they had instead created their most dangerous potential threat. The final confrontation would be nothing like a traditional dramatic revelation. It would be a complex, multi-layered psychological chess match that would redefine the very nature of their relationship. James believed he had constructed the perfect experimental scenario. That Caroline was merely a variable to be studied and controlled. He had spent years meticulously preparing every aspect of their interaction, believing he understood every potential variable. He was about to learn the fundamental lesson of psychological research. The subject always has the potential to reshape the experiment. Their confrontation would happen not in a dramatic physical space, but through a series of increasingly complex psychological interactions. Digital communications, subtle professional manipulations, carefully constructed scenarios that would test the very limits of psychological control. Caroline had become something the network had never anticipated. Not just a subject, not just a researcher, but a comprehensive psychological counterintelligence operative. In the final act, Caroline would achieve something far beyond simple revenge or exposure. She would systematically deconstruct the entire network, not through violent means, not through traditional investigative techniques, but by using their own psychological manipulation methodologies against them. Her reconstruction would be total and comprehensive. She would transform from a victim to the most dangerous variable in their elaborate psychological experiment, a living weapon created by the very system designed to control her. Each member of the network would be strategically isolated, their professional connections dismantled, their psychological constructions exposed, not through traditional investigative methods, but through the most sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques. The ultimate irony would be complete. The network that had chosen her as a subject would become her own comprehensive research project. Her revenge would be her complete reconstruction, a living demonstration that human psychological resilience could not be controlled, only momentarily redirected. The experiment was about to be comprehensively redesigned, and Caroline Mitchell would be its primary architect.
Thank you for watching. If you liked the story, like, subscribe to the channel and share with your friends. Thank you.